I landed myself in a psych ward in May of 2019, and I learned a lot of things while I was there. For one, it wasn't helpful in the way I thought it would be. And two, it's isolating as heck. And because of that, it means the world when someone on the outside does something to help. But what constitutes help? Well, that's what I'm going to be covering today. So without further ado, here are 5 ways you can help someone who's staying in a psych ward. The first thing is arguably the most important, and it's what some of the other things depend on, which is why I'm mentioning it before anything else. And it's to visit them if you can. Visiting hours in the psych ward for me were 1 hour in the evenings, and I cannot express how good I felt when someone came to visit me. The way it worked for me is that all the patients would sit in one of 2 or 3 chairs with the idea that the empty chairs would be the visitors that were, well, coming to see us. So all of us would end up spread out all across the unit. And then we'd hear the maglock doors that kept us all trapped in there open and close, and then the visitors would filter in, take the empty chairs, and we'd be able to talk to them for an hour. I worshipped that hour. That visiting time was my religion. And I had my dad visit me while I was there, and my best friend also came while I was there. And while I was in periods of absolute HE double hockey sticks at the ward, them coming by to see me really helped. So if you're on the list of visitors, then friggin' go. It will help them get through their stay and get through their day. The next thing is that if you are an approved visitor, you might be able to bring approved items. And while everything has to be checked, like you can't just bring anything to the psych ward, there are a few things that will make their stay a little bit easier. Oftentimes those who end up in psych wards are there involuntarily, meaning they're forced to stay by hospitals or legal orders. And so they don't exactly have the ability to grab things to help them pass the time. And even if they are there voluntarily, it doesn't mean they had the stability or foresight to grab those things as well. Anyways, there's a lot of free time in the psych wards and things get boring really fast. So here's a small list of what you could bring them, and you might even be able to do it during that glorious visitor hour. The first is puzzles. Oh my god, puzzles. Because it becomes a social activity to put them together, and then at the end, you all have something pretty to look at. Books are also good, even if they just kind of encourage the person to sit in a corner and not talk to anyone. But hey, some people don't want to interact with others at the ward, and that's totally valid. The final one is my favorite though, and it's a deck of cards. Because there's a lot of games you can play with one deck of cards. I have fond memories of playing King's Corners with this interesting guy that was in the ward next to mine. His past was dubious as heck, but we had a great time playing games when our units were allowed to intermingle with one another. And I always looked forward to his and I's conversations because boy oh boy were they wild. You meet all sorts of interesting people in the psych ward. And that made the time almost enjoyable. Almost. Well, it's probably more accurate that it made the time bearable. The next thing is actually not something you could bring to pass the time per se, but something that can help the person emotionally get through their stay. And that's photos. You should absolutely bring them photos. I still have the photos that my dad brought me when I was staying in the psych ward, and they really reminded me that I was loved. In a world where most of our photos are on our phones, it kind of goes against the grain to deal with physical photos. But you can't have phones in a psych ward, in my experience at least. Because boy oh boy, they take mine. But my dad brought me photos of a bunch of different things. He brought me pictures of trips we'd been on and memories we'd shared. But he also brought me pictures of like me and my best friend going to prom, or my graduation, or even my stuffed bee and all of my stuffed bee's friends. So it was a combination of a bunch of things, and it reminded me that there was a life outside of the psych ward that was waiting for me and worth coming back to. And they made me feel less alone outside of those visitor hours. So photos are a really good way to help someone and remind them of the good things in their life when everything seems pretty bleak and horrible, which is often the case in a psych ward. The next thing is answer phone calls. This is something you can actually do from the outside. Basically, phone time happens a few times a day, and while I previously mentioned I wasn't allowed to have my personal phone, I did have access to the ward's phone. And so I'd call my dad, or I'd call my friends, and if they picked up, I'd get to talk to them. And this was kind of like how visitor time worked. So if someone you know is in the psych ward, and they have your phone number, then start picking up those unknown numbers because it could be them on the other side. And then save that unknown number because they probably will call again. It's so easy to isolate in a psych ward, so pick up those calls. Finally, when they do get out, be supportive. Sometimes people want to talk about what happened while they were in there. I know I did. So if they want to talk, listen. Get some coffee or tea, sit a while, and listen. And if they don't want to talk, still get coffee or tea and just sit and be with them. When I was first out of the psych ward, I was a broken shell of a person that had no idea how to get her crap together. And I'll be honest, I was kind of numb for a bit because the experience wasn't what I thought it would be. And I always hesitate to say that it helped because in a lot of ways it didn't. But I did end up there for a reason, and I did manage to get a few important things out of it. And so I'll leave you with this. Psych wards are scary places, and hardly anyone looks forward to their stay. Most of the time, someone is super worrisome and unstable when they end up in a psych ward, and they will need help and support. These are just a few of the ways that people were able to help me when I was in a psych ward, and so I made this video to hopefully help someone else. And if you have anything to add, feel free to drop it in the comment section down below so that we can get even more cool advice out there for people who have friends, family, etc. that are staying in a psych ward. Other than that, thanks so much for joining me and once again making the uncomfortable comfortable. I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.